Hello and welcome to Youth TV. Today we're going to be looking at breadboard adapters. These are little things we can make ourselves which allow us to connect large items to the small holes in breadboards. There's a wide range of things we can do and make with these things, so let's head across the workbench and get started. Okay, the next adapter we're going to make is for bench power supply leads. These are a typical supply you'd get coming from your bench power supply. They usually have a 4mm banana plug on each end. Now obviously connecting this to your breadboard isn't very easy, so unless you have a built-in power plug sockets as you have on this breadboard, most people would have difficulty connecting these to the board. So I'm going to make a small adapter which connects the 4mm banana plug to a 1-pin breadboard plug. Okay, so what we need to make these adapters are two of these, which are, this is a 4mm banana socket, which the plug of the banana plug fits into, like so. So two of those, a red one and a black one. And we're going to need some cable. So if you get some cable suitable to hold a decent voltage and flexible, this is multimeter type cable, again red and black. So let's get started. So the first thing is to take off the little washer and nut. Okay, it's going to turn on my iron. Right, so we need to prepare each cable to receive the socket. So this is going to be soldered onto a little terminal here. So first of all, we strip off and tin the cable. Okay, and we're going to tin the terminal of the socket, just to prepare it for the solder joint. So just heat it up evenly and melt some solder. Like so. Now we can put a little bit of shrink wrap over the cable first. Now it needs to be thick enough shrink wrap to cover, there we are, cover the body. Let's try it on a cold one so we don't, nope, that's not big enough. So this is the next size up. So if you cut a piece so that it will cover the full length of the socket plus enough to cover the joint, so about there. So again, good practice, put this heat shrink over the cable before you attach it, and then we're going to simply solder this wire to the socket. try and get a good secure fixing. You want it to last. There you go. So give that a few seconds to cool, and then we're going to slide over the heat shrink tubing right over the joint and the plastic barrel, like so. And then we take our heat gun and we slowly shrink the heat shrink tubing, just rotating it as we go. All the way around, making sure it's a nice snug fit. Obviously there's a big difference between the diameter of the socket and the diameter of the cable, but this is quite good shrink wrap, so it should accommodate both. Okay, I think that's the best we're going to get, so let's just have a look. As you can see, we have a nice neat socket attached to a wire. So we're going to zoom out slightly. So we don't want this to be too long. The next stage is to attach a pin which will fit into the breadboard. Now I use male header pins for this. They're very cheap and very useful. So let's get male header pin. Here they are. So we just snip off one. As you can see, let's zoom in on that. So we're going to attach this little pin, the short point to the wire and the long point left to go into the breadboard. So let's just do that. So first of all, decide on the length you want. I would say keep it as short as you can, maybe about 2.25 inches. And then again, I'm going to be using a bit of shrink wrap to keep it nice and tidy. So just cut that and then put it over first. Let's strip it first, it's a bit short. So same procedure, strip the wire, tin it. And then put the small pin in the helping hands, and again tin that small pin. And then making sure you've got your heat shrink on before you solder the joint. You just want to quickly attach that to the pin. Go. So if we release that and then slide the heat shrink so it's covering the end of the pin housing, and again just shrink it down, rotating it as you go. And there we have the completed adapter. So let's move this out the way for a moment, and let's bring out our breadboard. So this would be our power supply cable from the bench power supply, which just plugs in to the adapter, and then that allows us to plug the pin anywhere you want on the breadboard, like so. So as you can see, very neat, very tidy, and just makes the job a lot more professional. So obviously that's the red one. We'll do the same for the black one. Okay, the next adapter we're going to make is this little thing here. Let's have a look. This is a very useful adapter. It's basically a breadboard pin on one end and a small female spade connector on the other. Now these connectors are very common. You'll find them in sockets, motors, all sorts of things. So here's an example. This is a small motor which we may want to connect to our breadboard circuit. So as you can see, it has two small terminals which are designed to be fitted with a female spade connector like this. So they just slide on and that gives you a connection instantly which you can plug into your breadboard. So let's make a few of these. I bought a small kit from Amazon which has a selection of these connectors. So let's zoom in and see that. So we've got the three sizes, 2.8, 3.8, 4.8. They come with these small rubber sleeves which slide over the terminal once it's been crimped to insulate them. Personally, I'm not fond of them. I prefer to use shrink wrap tubing, but they're there if you want them. So again, to save a bit of money and effort, if we just use these pre-made Chinese jump wires, they're very cheap, available on eBay and Amazon easily. They pre-fitted with a male pin either side, so if we just cut off one of the pins, we've then got a pre-made jumper wire ready to connect to a terminal. So let's just strip off some of that sheath, and then that wire is ready to crimp. So if you're going to use these, put them on before you crimp, and then you simply take one of the little connectors. We do need to use a special tool to fix these. You could use pliers and just bend them manually, but there is a nice ratchet tool available for crimping these things. It's got two jaws with a specially shaped prongs which bend over the metal points of the crimp. So let's put that in to the tool. So as we can see, I positioned the crimp in the tool and partly closed the jaws to hold it. So we're going to put the cable in from this side, making sure that the metal part of the cable goes into the inner crimping area, and then simply crimp. And then if we take out, we can see that the cable has been nicely crimped around the metal strands of the cable. It's often a good idea to crimp the outer area around the barrel, around the cable itself, just to tighten that nice and tight. So there we have a nicely crimped socket. So we just slide over the little plastic cover terminal, so that will then just push on to anything that has a terminal like this. So there you go. I suggest you make half a dozen of each size. So there's three sizes, so make 5 or 6 of each, and that should cover you for most switches, motors, other components that use the spade terminal connection method. So there we go. Very simple, but very useful. Okay, another little useful thing for prototyping are these small bulb holders, but we have the same problem. There's no easy way of connecting it to a breadboard. You could use alligator clip test leads, but that's a bit of a faff. So as you can see, it has 2 small screws, so all we need to do is attach 2 jumper wires to each screw. So I'm going to use some of these for that purpose. These are little crimps with a ring on the end, so we'll take 2 of those, and if we take out the screws, So these are just basically going to sit on here with a screw back in attached to a wire. So again, we'll use the same idea, cheap Chinese jump wire, one plug cut off and the wires twisted together. We'll use a crimping tool which just basically squashes the terminal flat. So we put the wire in. There's no need to heat shrink these, so put the wire in and squeeze together, and that crimps the wire to the terminal. So that then simply goes through the screw so, and we'll do the same with the other side. So put the crimp in the tool, and that gives us a nice crimped connection. So again, just reattach that with the screw. Yes, you need 4 hands to do this sort of job sometimes. So there we have a bulb holder with breadboard pins attached so they can be simply plugged in. Useful little prototyping gizmo. Another useful connector for breadboards is one of these things. This is a battery snap connector. These are commonly attached to things like a 9-volt battery, which then attaches to your circuits, but most other battery holders have a similar snap connector. There's a wide range of battery holders on the market, but the majority of the better quality ones have this snap connector, so it's useful to make some adapters which will connect things like battery holders or 9-volt batteries directly to your circuit. So all we need to do is to add some breadboard pins to the end of these 2 wires to make it easy to connect a power source from batteries directly to your breadboard. So we've seen this before, but we'll do it again. We're going to attach a male header pin to each wire. So let's get some header pins. So we need 2 of those. So if we cut off 1 and 2, and again I'm going to heat shrink them so they look neat. So we need some heat shrink. Right, so I should get 2 from that piece there. So again, put on the heat shrink before you prepare the wires. That'll save you aggravation later on. Just warm up the soldering iron while we're waiting. So again, strip off a small amount from each cable. And just twist those together like that. We got our helping hands. We can tin these wires with some solder. Let's just tin our iron first, clean that off, and then tin each of the wires. Okay, so let's just take them one at a time. If we take the header pin, again tin that, makes them sticking them together much easier. And if we take each wire and then just solder on to the pin. If we do the same for the other wire, the black one, again just pre-tin the header pin and then attach the other cable. And there we have the two joints soldered. So the last step is just to slide over the heat shrink tubing, and then if we just slide the heat shrink tubing over each pin. Let's get our hot air gun heating up. So if we slide it so that it's just over the end of the plastic part of the header pin. Now let's just heat these up. And there we have two nicely heat shrunk plugs. So we now have a battery snap connector which we can connect any battery to or battery holder to, and then plug that power supply directly into the breadboard. Very useful. It's worth making a few of these. Right, the final adapter I'm going to show you is a DC socket to breadboard adapter. So a lot of power supplies come with a standard DC 5.1 to 2.1 I believe, commonly called a barrel plug. So we're going to make a socket which that plug can plug into to breadboard pins. So again, very useful. So you can buy these little sockets which you can wire to. So this, unscrew the shroud like so, and inside you see a centre point and an outer shield point. So we're going to connect the positive wire to the centre pin and the negative wire to the outer pin. So again, we'll just take two cheap Chinese breadboard wires. One of the plugs cut off, and we'll just again use the same procedure. Strip the wire at the end, both wires, and then if we can use our iron to tin those wires first. Right, so that's both wires tinned. So very important, before you start soldering wires to the actual socket, make sure you put the sleeve on. The number of times I've done that and had to redo the solder joint, you wouldn't believe. So thread both wires through the sleeve, and then if we put the socket in the helping hands, and if we can again pre-tin the centre hole first of all. It's going to be the positive tip, solder. Careful, it does get hot. Can be a bit fiddly, but just persevere. Oops. And it flies off across your workbench. So let's just look at that. Okay, let's try gripping it here, make it a better hold. Yeah, I think that's better. So just again, get some heat onto there and apply some solder. Once we see it flowing, there we go. Okay, so the positive cable wire needs to be attached to that point there. It's a little bit long, so I'll trim that a little bit off that. You see there is a small hole. It can be good practice to thread your cable through that hole and then bend it over so that it touches the solder joint. Actually no, we do that, let's forget that. So we're now going to solder the red wire to that little center post. Like so. Okay, that's a good solder joint. And if we just take it out of the grip for the moment, we see that there is a small hole on the back. You can see that very well. We're going to thread the black wire through that hole and then bend it across so it's flat against the back piece. We can try and hold that in with the jaws like so, and then if we can just solder that black wire, the negative wire, to the outer shield of the cable socket. There we go. Right, so that's the soldering bit done. Just need now to put both cables. Now you see it's slid off the shield. Fortunately, with such small plugs on the end, it's not a problem to get them back on again, but it can be otherwise. So before we put that on, we're going to utilize these two little metal crimps and just to hold those cables, just bend them over so that they grab a hold of those two wires and prevent them going anywhere. So we'll just give that a grip. That's good and secure. So we'll just visually check the joint. There's no short circuit between the center pole and the outer metal piece. So if you're happy with that, just slide the shield cover across and twist it back into place. So we now have a DC socket to breadboard pin adapter. So if you've got a power adapter of any sort to power your circuit, just plug it into there, and then you can plug in your breadboard pins directly into your breadboard. Very useful. Again, make a couple. They're very handy. So that's probably it for now, but you get the general idea that if you want to attach larger components to your breadboard, it's basically a matter of soldering, crimping or attaching, however, some breadboard wires to the larger component to make connection more easily to your breadboard. So I hope that's been helpful. Let me know in the comments what you think.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like to see more, please click the video over here. Also, why not subscribe to our channel? We release videos 3 times a week on subjects about electronics, making things, building things, just having a good time in the workshop. So why not click the button below and subscribe? Thank you.